Bottom of Yud Zayin and Beis. We're at the two dots, but 3/4 of the way down, 8 lines into the wide lines.
Amar Rava?
Yep. Amar Rava.
Jules, what does this mean? I'm a space alien and I just don't realize it. I knew exactly where we were starting this point.
Oh. Amar Rava. Kol shebezav tamei v'nizaka mishalom mezik shalom. Okay, so there's a type of tumah called a zav. Tumah zav is interesting that if a zav sits in something or something is on top of a zav, it becomes tamei. So Rava says if it's like tumah zav, then in nizikin you'd be chayiv. If it would have become tamei had the guy been a zav, then you'd be chayiv with regard to damages.
Zav again means rabbi.
Zav is a type of tumah. We don't have.
Oh, okay, yeah, right.
The funny
Yeah. However, if had the guy been a zav, the item would not have become tummy. So in that case, you're only chayav chatzin nezek. So the Gemara appears to be pointing to Rava Tzroris Asalash Minan. Is Rava referring to Tzroris? In other words, this would seem to be the point of Rava. The point of Rava is a zav has to sit on something or something has to be on top of him. However, if he throws something at something else, let's say he takes a baseball and he throws it, at a bookcase, the bookcase does not become tummy. And therefore, let's say, for example, the ox kicked the baseball and it hits the bookcase. Same thing, you would only be chayav chatzin nezek because that's tzroros. Make sense?
What's
Tzroros. Tzroros means literally means a pebble,
okay.
rock.
Right.
But what it means is that if an animal kicks a pebble casually, regal, and it does damage, you typically pay only half damages.
Right. Got it.
So this Rav appears to say it's the same thing. For example, it's roughly the same as Tuma's Zav. Just like when a Zav touches something, he has to actually touch to become tummy. So in order for you to be chayav on regal, the animal has to actually touch it. That was the Gemara thinks the point of Rava. So the Gemara says, "Loy, that's not the point of Rava. Rava eglo mesheches bekar and kamash malan. The point of Rava is an ox that's pulling the small wagon. In other words, pulling the wagon. We'll see. Tanya Kamma says Rava. We have a brayz that supports Rava. Behemim wed l'shaber v'derech hilucha. An animal is habituated to break things as it walks. An animal goes into the domain of the victim. It damages with its body as it's walking, or with its hair. The hair gets tangled in something and carries it along. With the saddle, with its loads, with the bit in its mouth, the yoke on its neck. The chamor v'asoy, or chamor with the pack, with its pack, the eglam mesheches bekaron, or a calf that's pulling a wagon. All these scenarios, mishalom nezik shalom, you pay full damages. Now, even though the wagon, you might wonder whether the wagon is tzroros or not. Right? Is the wagon considered the animal itself, like the pack, or is it considered like tzroros, like something the animal moves indirectly? So that's what Rava says. No, just like a zav, anything that's on the wagon becomes tamei because he's sitting on the wagon. So too, with regard to nezikin, anything the wagon is considered the animal itself. And therefore, you're chayav because of Karen. Does that make sense? Okay.
So the tight spaces and the animal things, and
Yeah.
even if it's along the public way.
Public way, no, you'd be exempt. You're always exempted. You're always exempt. This is regular.
Somebody's property.
Yeah. But if it was a wagon would be considered the animal itself, not tzroros. It's not like the animal kicked something. I was going to see that the difference here might be actually an important distinction. The rabbis taught they had a well and there was a windlass with a rope and attached to a bucket, and they were pecking at the rope. And the rope broke. And the bucket cracked. They pay full damages. The guy who owns the birds, the chickens here. 1 second. Okay. Boy, Rava had a question. A chicken sort of pushes a vessel and it doesn't break it. And it rolled to a different place and there it broke. Okay, so basically the animal kicks a bottle of wine, and the bottle of wine rolls down the street and gets to the end of the street. It hits a rock and it shatters.
It gets into another domain.
Exactly. No, same domain, but totally. It's in a private property. It rolls a bottle of wine, which rolls down the hill, hits a rock and cracks. Is that sororis or not? The animal directly hit the bottle of wine, but that hit didn't break it. It was only after it rolled down the hill that it hit a rock and it shattered.
But this is all in private property.
All in private
the
property.
person doesn't belong in that property. That's with the wagon and the.
Or even if he did belong there, but the other guy had a right to keep his things there.
Oh.
Where opposed to public domain, where it's not the right of an individual to keep his stuff there. Okay. Okay, so this is the question of Rav, a fundamental question, and we'll see it relates to another fundamental. So Gemara says, Tifshalei midirabo. Let's answer the question from a different idea, similar one though, of Rabba. The Amar Rabba says, the guy goes to the top of the roof. Similar story. Zora klimi roshigag. For argument's sake, we'll use the same item. Okay, he took a bottle of wine. He threw it off the roof. Well, what do you think is going to happen to the bottle of wine? It's going to shatter. And what happened? Instead of it shattering, when it hit the ground, see, he threw it off the roof. And as it's descending, somebody else shatters it with a baseball bat. So is the guy chayav or not? So Rava says potter. He's exempt from damages. Why? Because a bottle of wine heading downward at a high rate of speed is broken. And therefore the guy broke a broken bottle of wine.
It was already dead. It was dead bottle of wine.
Correct.
Oh,
Okay. So similarly, we should argue that as soon as the animal kicks a bottle of wine in the direction of a rock, well, that's considered damage. It's not sororis, it's already broken.
the fact that its destiny has been
Exactly.
determined.
Exactly.
Oh, goodness.
Okay, so the Gemara says you're right. L'Rabba pshita l'Rav mi bali. Rabba had it. It's question. Rava had it. I'm sorry. Rabba said it's obvious that it does go based on the time of the event. You know, there's the first event, which would be the kicking of the throwing of the bottle of wine. But Rava wasn't sure. Tashma. Let's continue. Hidus enim muad. V'yesh omer hareza muad. What's hidus? Hidus is this chicken dance, quite literally. The chicken does this little jig. Anyway, enim muad. It's not considered a muad. We'll have to explain what this means in a moment. Obviously, enim muad. It's not habituated. V'yesh omer. When some say hareza muad, it is a muad. It is habituated. So Gemara says hidus sakadaytach. This little jig of the chicken is obviously normal. Elalav, it must be hidus v'hitis. Because of the jig, it kicked something. And the debate of whether it's muad or not is what? Is the question of Rava. In other words, the animal does this little jig and it rolls a bottle of oil down the street, down the pathway in the guy's house, and it breaks.
You're not suggesting because the chicken was washed to jig that this becomes a theoretically predictable event which needs to be taken into account in assessing damages on it.
We're absolutely trying to figure out if it's a predictable event. Well, so all right, so here's wait. No. Slow down. Very important here. Very important. The specific terminology the Gemara is using is muad. Is it habituated? But
mean, if it's normal for the thing. to
But
do?
typical word of habituated is a word that you use with regard to which of the three avos nezikin, which three types of shar of an axe. When do you use the word muad? Usually with regard to Karen. Now over here, the Gemara is actually going to try to say that it refers to tzereres, and this is a question we'll have to address. Tzereres, this thing with the pebbles. Does tzereres pays half damages? Is that because there's tamos and muadus? Is there naiveness and habituation in tzereres or not? This is sort of part of a very complicated Gemara, which is really where we're going right in now. I said this is part of it. As opposed to yesterday. It's probably among the hardest, among the more difficult Gemaras we've seen so far about Kamma. That's saying quite a lot. Okay. Okay, so let's presume that this debate here is the debate in the Gemara is we talk about the Hidas being a mood or not. The question is really is this dancing? What happened was the animal danced, it kicked something which rolled and shattered. Do we go based on the time that the event that occurred, that the animal kicked the bottle of wine, or do we go based on the time that it shattered? If we go based on the time that it shattered, we would say that it's tzereres, and therefore you'd only pay half damages, and that's what we would say. The terminology we would use, we would say ein a muad. It's not a muad. The Maaser Basar Karas, Nina Maaser Basar Tavermanas Linan. Okay. So we're on top now. Our last word on 17b. The Gemara says loy. No, that's not the case. Behitis tzereres kamiflagi. 1 second. Yeah. Okay. Of course, we're referring to a scenario. Okay. When not until now we were explaining the story of hidos v'hitis. What does that mean? The animal did the jig and it kicked something, and we're understanding the story was it kicked a bottle of wine which rolled down the hill and shattered. That's not the story. What was the story? It's a classical tzereres story. Animal's walking the property, kicks a pebble, sends it to a jug of, a nice mug of tea, and the tea mug shatters. Sorry, coffee mug for you folks. And this is the debate of Sumchus and the rabbis. We already noted this yesterday and before, that how much do you pay for tzereres is machlaikas, right? What do the rabbis say? Traditional opinion is tzereres pays half damages. However, Sumchus says you pay full damages. That's the opinion of Sumchus. And Sumchus will feature very prominently today. We'll look at the Sumchus for Rabbanan Kamma. Okay, so in other words, the debate here is classical tzereres. It's a rate, it kicks a pebble which hits a mug and cracks it. And the debate here is, do we say it's muad, meaning you pay full damages like the opinion of Sumchus, or do we say it's half damages in the opinion of the rabbis? Together?
Yeah.
Okay, Toshma. You had these chickens that were pecking at the rope of the windlass. They sever the rope and they break the bucket. They pay full damages. We see from here, the fact that they broke the rope, and that when exactly did the bucket crack? As the bucket was ascending, and we say it cracked the moment they cracked the rope. What does that tell you? We look at the event that caused it to break, and therefore, therefore you're free to pay full damages. So the Gemara says, no. When we talk about paying full damages, we didn't mean full damages on the bucket. We meant full damages on the rope. They pay for breaking the rope. So the Gemara says, we're talking about the ropes. The Gemara says, it's abnormal for the animals, for a chicken to be pecking at a rope. The rope is not food. This is not shane. If the rope was food, that'd be one thing. But the rope is not food. It's not food, you should not expect the animal to be consuming it. Therefore, it should be chatzin because it's mishun, it's unusual. So Gemara says, no. The mo is belisha. There was dough in the rope. The rope was sort of covered with dough. That's why they were pecking at the rope, and that's how eventually they broke the rope, and you be chayiv on the rope. Gemara says, "Vanishbert liktani." The bucket broke. So in other words, clearly we're not referring to the rope, because if we're referring to the rope, who cares if the bucket broke or not? It's irrelevant. They broke the rope, the rope of the windlass. Now the bucket fell down and cracked. Who cares that now the Bryce says you pay full damages for the rope? Okay, fine. Who cares whether or not the bucket broke then? It's irrelevant to the story. Right? It's not important. We have no clue what the bucket broke, and maybe somebody saw it, and maybe somebody didn't. And maybe the price of tea in China increased, or maybe it didn't. It doesn't make a difference. There's no difference. The question here is on the rope, not on the bucket. Who cares what happened to the bucket? Why is the Bryce telling me the bucket broke? Obviously, because when the Bryce says you need to pay, it means you need to pay for the bucket that broke, not for the rope. Because if the Bryce was focusing on the rope, who cares what happened to the bucket? It's not relevant to the story. Make sense?
No.
No.
I accept it. No.
No. I'll explain. The Bryce says they picked at the rope and broke the rope.
Okay.
According to the Gemara's interpretation of the Bryce, that means they have to pay for the rope. And okay, now what happened to the bucket? I don't know. What difference does it make? It's a separate question. We could also talk about the bucket. This Bryce is not referring to the bucket. We could have a new discussion. We could talk about the bucket. We could say, are you chayav for the bucket? Shalom, you chayav chatzin? I don't know. But it's not relevant to the discussion of the Bryce if we're referring to the rope. So why does the Bryce need to tell me that the bucket broke? The purpose of the Bryce is to tell me you're chayav for breaking the rope. Why? Because a rope that's filled with dough is normal to be pecked by a time to go, by chickens. If that's the case, of what relevance does the breaking of the bucket have to do with the Bryce? Either the bucket may have broken, it may have not broken. So it must be that actually this is a mistake to learn the Bryce this way. It can't be the Bryce is referring to the rope, because the Bryce clearly is referencing the bucket. Obviously, it's the bucket that broke. But so it must be that actually we're talking about the bucket. This Bryce is Sumchasi. It's the opinion of Sumchas. That says that it's true the bucket is Tzureris. But Sumchas says Tzureris pays full damages. So that makes sense. The Gemara says Sumchas. We're talking about Sumchas Ema Seifa. Nitiz Ibenu Shavar V'Nafal Akli Achav V'Shofra. Okay, but that was the animal shatters the vessel. So you have an ox, walks down the street, it steps on top of a pottery thing, and sure enough, it shatters. And as it shatters, one of the shards flies into a fine drinking glass and shatters the drinking glass. Okay, so what happened? Right, so we have two things here. It steps on a coffee mug,
Okay.
which obviously can't support 1,000 pounds.
Is it Yachid or Rabbi?
Let's say it's Yachid.
Okay, right.
Private domain. So it steps on the coffee mug, shatters it, and one of the shards shatters a fine drinking glass. So now the mug is what type of damage? The mug is regular regal. It stepped on a mug, that's regal.
So you get
Full damage.
compensation?
Yep. The drinking glass, on the other hand, is Tzureris, because it hit something that hit.
Unanticipated, as they would say in legal parlance, quote unquote, act of God situation.
Not so sure. Not so sure. Tzureris is not necessarily unpredictable.
In this case, I mean,
I'm not
it's
so
an
sure about that.
unpredictable, it's unexpected.
Unexpected, you can say, is a better word, but I don't know if it's unpredictable. I think it's perfectly predictable. It doesn't make a difference. This is the law of Tzureris. Tzureris is not it's a tradition. It's not necessarily that there's a logical reasoning behind it. So Gemara says if it's Sumchas on second, then why the first vessel you pay full damages, the second one you pay half damages. The Sumchas, but if it's the opinion of Sumchas, miyas lechatzinezek. Does Sumchas pay chatzinezek? Sumchas does not hold the Tzureris for kitem, and if you'll say Shaina let Sumchas pay nezek kaychay l'kayachaychay.
Just say that simplicity is not considered Tzureris.
Sumchas, well, let's say Sumchas holds that whatever Tzureris is, you still pay full damages.
No.
Now, is that because someone doesn't hold of the concept of Tzureris, or is we'll have to see. Well, it could be there could be other differences also, which we'll get to. Now the Gemara, even now the Gemara proposes that Simchus would partially agree to Tzroros. He would differentiate though between koyach and koyach koyach. Okay, so what's koyach? Koyach is when they bit the rope and it dropped and that broke the windlass. That's in other words, their action broke something. Whereas the shard of the mug breaking a glass of wine, that's considered koyach koyach, double indirect. So maybe by double indirect, Simchus would agree to the rabbis. Okay, so the Bryce could still be referring to Simchus. In other words, what's the Bryce's question again? Bryce we're referring to here is the windlass, right? They pick at the windlass, it breaks the bucket. Guys chayav, full damages on the bucket. The question, of course, is why. So one proposal is because we look at the moment that they broke it. At the moment that they cracked, they ripped the rope. It's considered as if they broke the mug, the bucket, because eventually it would have broken on its own. But the Gemara doesn't want to go with that proposal, so the Gemara is looking for alternatives. Okay. So now we're in Simchus. The Bryce is talking about Simchus. What about the fact at the end of the Bryce it says you pay half damages in Tzroros? That's a unique type of Tzroros. It's called koyach koyach, double indirect. Okay, fine. If you say the Bryce is Simchus, then we will resolve the question of Rav Ashi. Rav Ashi wanted to know, Simchus that says Tzroros pays Nezek Shalom, is there a difference between indirect or double indirect? Now we have our answer. If the Bryce is referring to Simchus, double indirect, Simchus agrees to the rabbis that you'd only pay half. Elalav, okay. So the Gemara says, well, if we want to say that Rav Ashi's question remains unanswered, we must say that Brisa is Elalav Rabbanan. It's the rabbi's opinion. And Shema Mina, we must go back to the original resolution, which was Basar Mikar Azlinan, that we look at the moment that the rope was torn and say that's the moment the bucket broke, even though it didn't actually break until, I don't know, a handful of milliseconds later. Mm-hmm. So Gemara said, okay. Rabbi Barabaya says, not necessarily. 1 second. Okay. Okay. So Rabbi Barabaya says we have a simple resolution here to answer this question according to the rabbis. The ka'azal minei minei. When we talk about this, the windlass and the bucket, so you thought the windlass and the bucket were in the well, right? And the bucket was cut from the windlass, so it sort of shattered on the way down the shaft, right? Or maybe when it hit the water at high speeds. That's not what happened. What happened was the windlass, the rope and the bucket were outside the well. And what happened was the animal tore the rope and then rolled the bucket until the bucket shattered. So it's not Tzroros then. It's nothing to do with Tzroros. It literally pushed the bucket until it threw it into a rock and the thing shattered. So therefore, this has nothing to do with Tzroros. Okay.
He's changed the circumstance.
Okay, next Gemara. Boy Rova. So Rova had the next question. Chatzin has its Tzroros. Migufa mishalam oy me'aliyah mishalam. We spoke about Karen, right? Chatzin nezek of a naive ox. What's the maximum payment? More than just half, less than half. The maximum value of the aggressing animal. Does that rule apply to Tzroros or not? And this leads to a bunch of similar questions on the subject. For example, an ox, right? You have a naive ox, and then it starts goring multiple times. What do we say? It becomes a muad, habituated ox. Does the same apply to Tzroros? Or not? Let's say an animal always constantly kicks pebbles and hits things. Does it become a muad or not?
The serial kicker.
So we'll get to that question also, be part of today, tomorrow. Okay. So Boy Rova. So Rova wants to know, the first question is there a limitation of megufai, the maximum value of the aggressing animal or not? You pay half of the full damages. Do we say it must be that you pay migufai, the maximum value of the aggressing animal, because every other half payment that we find, there's only one of them, which is Karen, is limited by the maximum value of the aggressing animal. Or do we say or do we say no, you have to pay the full value? Why? Because we never find an animal engaging in normal behavior that has a limitation of migufay. It's only abnormal behavior where we have that limitation. So in other words, do we compare it to Karen and say, look, it's like Karen because it's chatzi nezek, so it must be you pay migufay, or do we say no, it's different than Karen? Why? It's not mishuna. It's not abnormal, it's normal. Sroris is normal behavior. Toshma. So see the brisa. Hidus enimud. The yeshayimrim hareizimud. This hidus. This the chicken jig, right? Enimud. It's not muad. And some say it is muad. Some says hidus dance. Obviously, the dance is a normal dance. It's a normal jig. Hidus haydach elav. Hidus vehitis. It must be. Hidus v'hitis where the dance, where the jig sort of kicked something. Ubahaka. And this is the debate. Manda Amar Einem Wood Kasavar Meguf Mishalom. Manda Amar Wood Kasavar Me'aliyah Mishalom. Okay, in other words, what happened was the animal did the jig and kicked something which broke. And what's the debate whether or not it's a muad or not? The debate is, do you pay Meguf or do you pay Me'aliyah? Is the maximum damage limited by the value of the aggressing animal or not? And that's the terminology we use. Do we call it muad or not? Okay, so the Gemara says, 1 second. The opinion says it's not a muad, it's not habituated because he says you pay maximum value of the aggressing animal. The opinion that says that it is a muad, they say that opinion holds you pay the maximum, the value, half the value of the damages, the actual damages, not limited by the maximum value of your animal. Okay, so sure enough, the Gemara is not impressed with that proof. No proof from there. This brisa could easily be the debate between Sumchas and the rabbis. In other words, the opinion that says have a muad, what does that mean? It means you pay full damages. That's Sumchas, because Sumchas does not hold its tzroros. The opinion says you pay half damages. That's the rabbis which hold its tzroros. Okay, good. I got to a famous Gemara. Remember this Gemara back when we first learned Bava Kamma. How many years ago? 18 years. 18 years ago now. 18 years ago, I first learned Bava Kamma. 17 years since I learned this Gemara. I remember the first time I learned it. The dog that took the cookie. Okay, the problem with this cookie was that this wasn't such a simple cookie. The cookie was also a coal. It was a burnt cookie. I took it out of the fire. This obviously wasn't baked in an oven. They didn't really have ovens. They had fireplaces, mostly different types of fireplaces. One's called a tana, one's called a kirayim. Anyway, so it takes out this coal, and it goes to the pile of hay. And you can imagine what's happening next. It eats the cookie part, and it ignites the pile of hay. So what happens? The cookie is shein, right? So the animal has to pay for the cookie. But on the fire, that's sort of like tzroros. So mishalom chatzin nezek, you pay half damages. My time, lav mishum dehavil tzroros. It seems that the reason here is it's indirect. The fire is sort of the pebble. In other words, just like when an animal kicks a pebble and it breaks something, we say chatzin nezek. So too, when the animal, instead of kicking a pebble, it lights a fire. The fire is considered as if it's the animal's pebble, as it were. 1 second. One second. One second. Man amar enem kasavar meguf mashalom. Man amar muad kasavar one second. Kasavar okay. Tashma. Just listen to this 1 second. Hold on. Okay. And we've learned on this brisa, Mishalom Chatzin Ezek Megufay. On this brisa, we learned that the half damages that you pay for the lit pile of hay is limited by the maximum value of your dog, Megufay. So what do we hear? What do we see here? Sroiris does have a limitation of Megufay. So the Gemara says, "V'tizbara, is that possible?" Rabbi Lazar nezik shalom Megufay miyashtichan. 1 second. Okay. Now in this brisa, which the dog that takes the cookie, so he pays full value for the cookie and half damages for the hay. Rabbi Lazar says he pays full damages for the hay. Now the Gemara says, is it possible according to Rabbi Lazar you pay full damage for the hay when and have that limited of megufay, have that limited by the maximum value of the dog? There's no such thing as we never find a full payment that pays megufay. So how exactly is that possible? How could you say the Bryce is referring to Tzoros and say according to Rabbi Lazar you're limited in the payment of megufay if there's never a full payment that's megufay? Ella must be going to shani begachelas. We're talking here about Karen. The behavior of the dog was abnormal. So what? Okay, so the half payment megufay, that makes sense. That's regular Karen. Chatzin as a Karen, limited to megufay. Okay, what's the opinion of Rabbi Lazar? Rabbi Lazar says you pay full payment megufay. Why are you paying megufay if it's a muad, or if you're making any full payment? So the Gemara says, Rabbi Lazar savar l'krab tarfin. Okay, the first question is if it's Karen and it's abnormal, why are you making the full payments? The answer is because it's chatzar anizik. It's the domain of the victim, and in the domain of the victim, Reb Tarfon says Karen pays full damages. However, despite the fact that Karen pays full damages in the house of the victim, half the payment, which is normally the payment of Tam, is limited by megufay. So let's explain. Let's say the value of the dog is $500. Is that what a dog costs today? I have no clue. Let's say it's $500.
Depends on the breed. Yeah.
Okay, or if it's the saber-toothed pug.
You're the one. They make my wife happy. You don't
No.
know the answer to that question.
Now, let's say the dog is $500, and the value of the godish of the straw pile is $2,000. So now, according to Rabbi Lazar, Karen b'shus nezik is nezik shalom. That's her tarfin, full damages, but it's not 2,000. Why? We say like this: half the damages you pay like a tam. So what's half of 1,000? Half of 2,000? 1,000. So half the payment of 1,000, full payment, $1,000. The payment of the tam part, which is the other half, is limited by megufay. So how much you pay for that half? 500. So it's $1,500 instead of 2,000. You got it? You pay only 1,000 for Karen Chatzar Nizik. V'lohi. 1 second. Hold on 1 second. 1 second. 1 second. I'm sorry. Take that back.
Nope.
I'm sorry. I made a mistake here. The Gemara implies that according to Reb Tarfon that says that you pay nezik shalom in a private domain, Reb Tarfon would agree that it's limited by megufay. So the payment actually would be 500. My mistake. I confused with the next Gemara.
Oh.
The next resolution. So you'd actually pay 500 in this case, according to Reb Tarfon, because you'd pay the full pay the Karen b'chatzar nizik, full payment of Karen, abnormal behavior, even of a naive animal, in the domain of the victim is still limited by megufay. So the Gemara says, it's not necessary to give this a resolution. My time, why are we explaining the story of the dog eating the cookie like Rav Tarfon? Mishum nezik shalom, because of the full payment. We can't. Why, according to Rabbi Lazar, would you make a full payment? Why, according to Rabbi Lazar, would you make a full payment if it's Karen? We must say it's Rav Tarfon. The Gemara says no. There's another reason why it could be a full payment. Rabbi Lazar savar kisumchas. Amar tzroris nezik shalom mishalom. This could be a scenario of tzroris, going back to the original Gemara. It can be a scenario of tsureris. The fire is the pebble of the dog. Okay, if that's the case, why are you paying Megufay? Why are you making full payment and limiting it to Megufay? The Gemara says, "V'savar like Rabbi Yehudah, Amar Tzat Tamas Mekayma Imedus. V'yiktani Megufay Atzat Tamas." Okay, so very interesting. According to Sumchas, tsureris pays full payment, but half the full payment you pay Megufay. And so limited by the maximum value of the dog. Yeah. 1 second. Yeah. So in other words, Simcha sort of partially agrees to the rabbis. He agrees to the rabbis that the payment of tsureris is divided up into 2 halves, and one of those halves pays Megufay. And that is what Rabbi Elazar meant as well. So the rabbis say you pay half payment Megufay, and Rabbi Elazar says you pay full payment, but half of that full payment is limited by Megufay. So in the case of the Gadish, where the dog is worth $500, the Gadish is worth $2,000, you pay $1,500 according to Rabbi Elazar. Okay, let's continue. Amr of some of Breder of Ashi to Ravino. So if some of the son of Rav Ashi says to Ravino, Eimer the Sham Lev Rabbi Yehudah B'Tam V'Nas Mud, the Mud Mitchilasai Mishamet Lai. Is it okay? So Rabbi Yehudah says a very interesting rule. Rabbi Yehuda's rule is that when an animal becomes a mud, half the payment is still limited by Megufay. So this is by regular carrot. So you have an animal that works 3 times. First 3 times, maximum payment is the maximum value of the animal. After the 3rd time, or maybe the 3rd time, we'll get to that. What happens? We say that the payment is me'aliyah, full value of the animal. But that's only true of the second half of the payment. Now that you make a full payment, the second half of it is a full payment. But the first half stays as is. It's still limited by the maximum value of the aggressing animal. But this is all true when the animal starts off as a naive animal, as a tam, and becomes a muad. Tsureris is always a muad. Tsureris is urche, it's normal, it's not abnormal behavior. So mishametle, is it appropriate to invoke Rabbi Yehuda's opinion when we're talking about normal behavior? So in other words, the Gemara's resolution combining Sumchas with Rabbi Yehudah, the Gemara says is not tenable. You can't say that a normal behavior that makes a full payment should be limited by that half of the full payment should be limited by Megufay. There's no source for that claim. When Rabbi Elazar talks about full payment, the animal became a muad. And the question is, could you become a muad to tsureris? In other words, going back to the original story, the dog that ate the cookie. What's the dog that ate the cookie? It's a story of tsureris. What does Rabbi Elazar say? Okay, so now we're saying with regard to tsureris, we're saying that according to Rabbi Elazar, it cannot be that tsureris is still limited by Megufay. Half payment is Megufay. Now Rabbi Elazar says you pay full payment. Why are you paying full payment? Because the animal is a muad. It's done tsureris multiple times, and now it's a muad for tsureris. But we still say that that the naive part of it stays as is, and you remain with you remain with the half damages is limited by Megufay. Again, the scenario of the dog that ate the cookie, this has happened. It's a multiple time story. It's happened many times. According to the rabbis, it doesn't make a difference. It's still half payment, and tsureris is limited by Megufay. And according to Rabbi Elazar, no. Now that it's a muad, it's not limited by Megufay anymore. It's not limited by Megufay, and therefore, it's not. Give me a second here. The animal is a muad, therefore you make a full payment. The first half, the half that you always pay of tsureris, that one is still limited Megufay. And the other half, now that it's a muad for tsureris, that payment is me'aliyah, it's a full payment. Okay. Combination of Megufay and me'aliyah. That's a good way to say it. Okay. we'll have to drop here and continue
Right.
tomorrow.